the North Country Trail, a section of it. He brought some interesting gear and items, essential items that he took with him, and you're welcome to come and view it afterwards and answer questions afterwards. So let him do his speech, and then we can ask if we have any questions. Okay?
Sounds good. All right. Ooh. Am I in the dark for this?
I don't know.
I don't know how we do this. I'm good either way. However we do it, I don't know. I can just be that mysterious voice up front. All right. Lorraine said I should talk to you a little bit about how I got into hiking and backpacking. My mom passed in 2009, early onset Alzheimer's. It was an ugly, miserable time. And in 2010, my wife and daughter and we talked my dad into coming up to Pictured Rocks. And we car camped. And everywhere around Pictured Rocks, you see these goofy signs that have the backcountry trail that runs from Grand Marais to Munising. And I was staring at this thing and thought out loud. I said, hey, I think I want to come back and walk this trail someday. That sounds like a neat adventure. And my wife says, I would love to do that. I thought, who are you? And so for, was that 20, Laura? Yeah. For our 20th anniversary, we bought backpacking gear and hiked the Pictured Rocks Trail. We'd never been before, never been on a trip before, had no experience. We thought, if we like this, we'll keep doing it. If we hate this, we'll sell all the gear online, and it wouldn't have been any more money than a cruise, but if we like it, like all the initial investment has been made. I look at the kit that I had then and the kit that I have now, and it's a funny thing. It was a good thing I was a lot younger then, because it was way heavier, but I fell in love with it. Absolutely loved it. And so if I can be doing anything, I'd just as soon be out in the woods, sleeping, pooping in the woods, and enjoying life out there. Because for me, it's a wonderful thing. So this is the trip that I was able to do this past summer. Laura Miller was all over me. She's like, you need to come present to Solar. If you like this, you should thank Laura. If at the end of the night you don't like this, you know who to throw drinks or food at when you go to the bar later this evening. But essentially, I was able to get on trail with the North Country Trail. I got on trail July 28, just south of Tahquamenon Falls, which any Far Out app, peoples, Far Out app, okay? We'll talk more about the Far Out app, but on the Far Out app, that's mile 455. And then I came off trail on September 4th on the western edge of the Porkies on mile 48. Anybody been to Presque Isle Campground in the Porkies? It's gorgeous. It's worth going to. And then on the way home, we did the Manistee River Loop. It was a little bonus loop we did on the way home. So in all, it was about 420 miles that we did. So what I want to do tonight is just kind of walk you through gear, routes and reloads, and why I like to hike. You said, I can stop at the end of each section and do questions, or I can wait all the way to the end. How do we do this? Wait to the end. All right. If you don't like that answer, what's your name? Boss. Okay, get with the boss. All right. All right, so gear. I am admittedly a bit of a gear nerd. Every now and then I will watch YouTube videos on gear. And by every now and then, I mean like multiple ones a day. It's just a rabbit hole I like when I'm on trail. I'm always like scoping, like if you cross paths with me on trail, I know what you're carrying because I'm rubbernecking and I'm looking. And when I walk into camp, I'm paying attention to this stuff. That's me. Are there any other gear nerds? All right, you two are going to enjoy this section a lot. The rest of you endure it. We'll try and go a little quicker for people who aren't gear nerds. So lighter pack is a tool you can load all your stuff into. base weight is this idea of what's your nonsense going to weigh minus fuel, food, and water. And for this trip, my base weight was heavier than I would have liked it to be. That's in part because I'm on trail for 6.5 weeks. Like if I get on trail for a weekend, I got a pretty good idea what the weather's going to be like and what gear I need to take to deal with that. If I'm on trail for 5 or 6 days, I'm willing to roll the dice. I know meteorologists are liars, but I'm willing to roll the dice and go, okay, this is a gear I'm going to dial in and take. When you're on trail for 6.5 weeks, there's just no way of knowing. And so you're trying to pack for a range of weather conditions, and it just means you're carrying more weight. When you're on trail for 6.5 weeks, you're going to take more luxury items. So I had 2.5 pounds just in stuff that I didn't need to have, but I didn't want to go 6.5 weeks without. And so the base weight's a little bit higher. When I threw in water and fuel and food for a 6-day food carry, I was right at about 29 pounds. I would carry about 1 liter of water. Who can tell me what 1 liter of water weighs? That's right. And then I would take one of the little 110 gram canisters of fuel, which when it's all in is about 7 pounds. So big three is your tent, your backpack, your sleeping system. I was carrying a X-Mid Pro. I've got it up here. We can't set it up in the room because it's a trekking pole tent, and I think the church would be upset if we drove, pegs into their flooring. But I absolutely love it. I am 6'1". It is just big enough for me. If I was another inch taller, my feet or my head would be hitting something. But super light. It's a Dyneema tent, so it's super rainworthy. It did me well. I'm using a Z-Packs Arcall 60 as my pack. It's a Dyneema pack. It's 22 ounces. That's without nonsense in the pockets and whatnot. I really like it. I found it to be really comfortable, but you need to keep the weight under 30, 35 pounds for it to be comfortable and for it to carry the weight well. And then my sleep system, I have it up here. I discovered by accident that I'm a quilt guy. I kept using my sleeping bag like a quilt. It was more comfortable to me that way. The problem with that is when you try and use your sleeping bag as a quilt, you get all these drafts that come in underneath your bag because it's not designed to be used that way. The way the Zen Bivy system works, and I've got it over here, you've got a sheet that slides over your sleeping pad, and then it clips down on the quilt. And so you can roll around in this thing like an eel thrashing around out of the water, and you don't get drafts. And it was super versatile. And so I had a silk liner, and then the quilts, and then the pad. And there were nights where it's 70 degrees out. It was just hot. And all I did was sleep in the silk liner. I had my ideal temperature was 55, and I would button up both sides of the quilt, and it was just snug and it was warm, but it wasn't freezing cold. I had nights that went down to 38 degrees, and then you've got the quilt and you got the liner, and you put on a fleece or you put on your puffy and you just hunker down. But I was good. And so depending on the temperature, I was just wearing, just in the silk liner. Maybe I've got one side of the quilt buttoned down. Maybe I've got two sides of the quilt buttoned down. And it just provided a lot of versatility. And then I have a Franken pillow, it's a climate pillow that I went to the craft store and I got a piece of 1-inch foam padding, because I find that blow up pillows, it just feels like I'm laying on a cinder block. And maybe I just have delicate ears. I don't know. But I put that 1-inch piece of foam in there, and it was nice and tall. It was really soft. And I found it to be really comfortable. I'm not using this anymore because I've had an issue with the climate valves keep failing on me. So I've made some adjustments, but this is what I used. And then I used the Nemo. It's the all season. It was super, super reliable. It was fairly comfortable. There are more comfortable pads out there, but it got the job done. It was super warm, and it really treated me well. All right, cook system. I used a Franken pot, and I'll explain that as well. So on the right here, you kind of have the holy grail of ultralight cook systems. It's a Toaks 550 titanium pot, and you would pair that up with a BRS stove. So anybody know the weight of the Toaks pot off top of their head? I think it's 2.5 ounces. I think your BRS is 0.9 ounces. And so your cook system, you're all in for about 3.5 ounces. And it works. The trouble with it is it's not terribly fuel efficient. And so I'm a 3 boil a day minimum kind of guy on trail. I'm going to boil for coffee in the morning. I'm going to boil for dinner at night because I'm doing dehydrated food. And then I'm going to boil at least one more time at night for tea and a snack. If it's cold out, I might want to boil a 4th time to have something warm when I take a break. If with the BRS and the Toaks 550 and 110 gram canister, you're going to get 3 boils if you pay close attention and you're only boiling 1 cup of water, 8 to 10 ounces. You're good for a 5-day food carry, 3 boils each day. And then you come off trail and this thing is like, it sounds like an empty cargo container. There's hardly anything in there. And I had a buddy, we did another trail. He ran out on day 5 because he didn't pay close attention. On the far left there, you have the fire maple petrol 2 pot. The neat thing about the fire maple, as you can see on the bottom there, it has a heat exchange. And so it is incredibly efficient when you're boiling water, like ridiculously so, but it's a lot heavier. And being a bit of a Graham weenie, I was like, I don't want to carry weight that I don't have to carry. And so watching a YouTube video on gear, I ran across John from Flat Cat Gear, and he had a video on how to take your fire maple and machine it down. So you cut off right where the black is on top there. You're cutting off that lid, which has all kinds of weight. And this is my pot right here. And so you can see it in the middle. For 1.5 ounces more than the holy grail of ultralight packing, I've got this baby. I was able to get on a 6-day food carry, I could do 4 boils a day and still come off trail with 1/3 of a can of gas. It was just super efficient. I absolutely loved it. I wasn't having to babysit every time I'm boiling water, freaking out that I'm wasting fuel. It's just one thing I didn't have to think about. And it was great. I paired that with a Soto lid instead of that big clunky plastic lid you see up there, and it just sits right in there. And then you can use it to pour. The only additional piece I had to add, because I cut off my handle, when you heat things up on here, it's hot. And so this little sleeve that fire maple sells, I just bought one. You can see I cut it down. I put the leftover on the fire maple over there to the left, and on the middle there, I've got the rest of it. So I can heat this baby up. I'm barely using any fuel. I drink it right out of here. And it was wonderful. It's one of my favorite pieces. All right. Clothing. I wore the clothing that you see on my body right now, right down to my skivvies, which no, you cannot see those. Don't ask. That's inappropriate. But I've got matches of all the clothing up here. And so if you want to check something out, folks who aren't familiar with the Alpha Direct fabric, it's awesome. It was designed for the military. It is super, super light. It is super, super warm. And it was great. Outdoor Vitals, I really like their clothing. And so I've got a sun hoodie by them and a shirt by them. And then I just kind of ran across the Sedan pants. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. But there's what is his name? Backcountry? No, it's not Backcountry. I can't remember the name of the guy. Too many YouTube videos. But he has an email thing called the Honey Hole, where he'll email it to you, and it's just got deals on backpacking gear. And the pants are normally $100 and I got them for $40. And I wore a pair and I liked them so much I bought a second pair. They were great. And so if you want to come and mess with clothing, you're welcome to do that. All right, favorite gear. In addition to the cook pot, I brought a Z-Pax 7x9 tarp. If I'm out for a weekend and it's going to rain all weekend, I'll bring a tarp. But typically I don't want to bring a tarp. I got a tent. What do I need a tarp for? If I'm out for 6.5 weeks, I'm recognizing there are probably going to be nights where I'm going to roll into camp and it's going to start raining, or it's raining when I get there and it's going to rain all night. And I just did not want to be stuck in my tent all night. I remember going to Pictured Rocks with some friends. We rolled into camp, we set everything up. It started raining at about 3 p.m. and it stopped raining at about 3 a.m. I'm not a cook and eat in your tent kind of guy. I won't do that. I think that's a great way to become a bear burrito. And so we literally set up at the bear box, made our dehydrated meals, and ate them in our rain gear in the pouring rain, and then got back into our tent. It was miserable. With this baby, I set this up, and I do the exact same things at camp that I would do if it wasn't raining. I just have the added pleasure of the sound of the rain on the DCF, which I find to be very soothing. And so for 6 ounces, it was worth having with me. And last summer up in the UP just happened to be pretty stinking wet. And so I utilized that quite a bit in camp. Another favorite gear item is this Gossamer gear. It's a 1/8 inch foam pad, and it was super versatile. So I would put this under my sleeping pad at night, and it would keep my pad from sliding around in the tent, especially if you're on ground that isn't particularly level. If I stopped for a break or I stopped for lunch and I don't feel like putting together my chair, I just pull this off and I sit on this thing. If I get into camp and I want to stretch out my back, or I get up in the morning and I want to stretch out my back, instead of laying on the ground and getting all filthy, I would use this. You can see I'd keep it right on top of the pack there. If it was raining, instead of it being folded like this, I'd have it like this on the top of my pack, and it would act like a shingle. And so it was one more layer of water protection for the pack. It was super versatile. I loved it. And then another favorite piece was the Pad Pal pump. I forget your name in a green hat.
I didn't tell you.
You didn't, Mike? I should remember that. All right. Mike didn't like my Pad Pal because it is obnoxious, the sound. But when you roll into camp and you've done 16 miles and it's your third 16 in a row, the last thing I feel like doing is blowing up my pad. For 0.3 ounces or 8 grams, you plug it into your phone or into whatever battery you're bringing, and it blows up your pad for you. I loved it. It was wonderful. And then my chamois. This is what I bring as a towel on trail. It's just a swimmer's chamois, and it never wets out. So we could get all of us in this room soaking wet. I don't know how we would go about doing that. And I could dry me off and wring it out and pass it to the next person. And you just keep wringing it out and keep drying. And so it didn't matter how wet I got, I could get me dry. If I got condensation in the tent, because it's a DCF tent, I can dry it off with this and literally dry it off. You can't do that with sil poly or sil nylon. You can get some of the water off. With the DCF, you can make it dry. I would get out of the tent in the morning after it rained all night, and I could dry my tent off completely. And so now I'm not packing a wet tent into my pack or carrying that water weight with me. It was super versatile. Was it kind of nasty at the end of a week? Yeah, it was, because I'm drying off my tent, I'm drying me off. You know, I contend if you're out there for a while, you just get feral and you just embrace that. And so when I get into the lake or the river where I'm taking a bath that night, I just bring this in there with me and get it good and rinsed off, and that was clean enough for me. And the next morning, I dry the tent off or I dry the tarp off, and away we would go, but it never wetted out. It was wonderful. All right. We got to switch Jeff here. I'll assume I hit that. That's a good question. No, routes and sections. He's amazing. Something like that. Yes. Good. All right. So I knew I wanted to start at Tahquamenon Falls. I knew I wanted to end at the end of the Porkies. And I planned for about a year and a half for this nonsense. And it started with just trying to figure out, okay, like what route am I going to take? How am I going to break this up into sections? And so what I did is I stared at the, somebody pronounce it for me. And Vaso, anybody? And thank you, say it again real loud. Avenza maps, and spent months staring at those to try and figure it out. Here's the routes that I'd landed on. You can do it differently, but these worked for me. So route 1 is I went from Tahquamenon Falls to Grand Marais. 65 miles. You can see the average miles per day. I was able to do that 6 days, 5 nights. Route 2 or section 2 was Grand Marais to Munising, which, if you're familiar with that area, that's Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. We called this the cream puff section. It's 40, it's nearly 45 miles. If you start at Woodland Park and you walk that whole section, you don't start at the visitor center there at Asabo. But we did it over, me and a buddy did it over 6 days, which meant you're only walking 7.5 miles on average per day. And it was slow going and it was nice, but we did that on purpose because it's incredibly picturesque and we wanted to take our time. Section 3 was from Munising to Marquette. I did this in a shorter number of days. I think this section was 2-in-1 for me. I've done it. I'm glad I did it. I don't see myself ever doing that section again. There was a lot of road walking. The trail was poorly maintained. There were sections where the brush is sternum high. You cannot see any trail, and you're just looking for the next blaze to try and figure out where through the brush you're going to go next. It was what it was. Section 4 was Marquette to Craig Lake State Park. And when you get west of Marquette, we'll talk about this more, your world changes. Section 5 was Craig Lake to Mud Creek. You're like, what's Mud Creek? It was a road that had an NCT parking lot that the trail happened to cross roughly the number of miles I wanted to try and walk in one section. It was just a convenient place to stop that section. Section 6 was picking up again at Mud Creek to the South Boundary Road, which runs along the south boundary of the Porcupine Mountains. And then the final section was through the Porkies there. So like, how did I land on those sections? How did I do sites? What was the trail like? How did I do reloads? So I literally just stared at the Avenza map for days and days and days. I'd spend my day off on Friday just staring at the map, looking at the different mileage stuff and going, okay, where does it make sense to like try and, how many miles do I think I can go in a day and where would it make sense to camp? And I just kind of took a shot at it based on the maps. I like to camp by water. I'm not a fan of dry camping if I can help it. I like to have a bath at the end of the hike. And I'll get into whatever lake, river, stream, culvert I can find and get cleaned up. And so basically I just kind of went, okay, I think I could do about this. I know I want this section to be this long. I know I've got this many days to do this section. Let me try and find a reasonable amount of miles to get me to the next water source. And that was the plan. And it looked great on paper. All right. I used some apps to help me with this. Use the Onyx app, the Far Out app, and the Garmin app. The Onyx app was really helpful when I was trying to figure out, am I on public land or private land? And we'll talk in a minute why that's important. The Onyx app was not up to date with the North Country Trail. And so if I'd followed the Onyx app the whole time, I would have been off trail for a number of sections because the trail had been rerouted and Onyx wasn't aware of that. The Far Out app was wonderful, absolutely wonderful for the NCT. It was totally up to date. The app is free. You have to buy your different maps. I think I paid $25 for the North Country Trail for the UP. It was up to date, had all kinds of waypoints that other people had put in there. Where you're going to find water, where you might find a campsite, where you're going to find a lookout, little notes on it. It was great. I had the Garmin app just because I had access to it because I had a Garmin. My wife insisted that I have one, so if I busted my leg or got attacked by a bear or betrayed by one of my buddies, I'd have some means of getting a hold of her if I had signal or not. I never used the Garmin app. So I just go, okay, what's my mileage? I know 6 days is a max. Where are the campsites? Where am I going to find towns? How am I going to think through reloads and laundry? And those kind of factors really drove how I came up with those sections and how I would do each day. I noticed there's a different world east and west of Marquette in the UP. And it really impacted the hiking. Things like towns and zeros and sites were really easy to find when I was east of Marquette. Like, you just be walking, you're like, hey, there's a flat spot. We're on public land. There's water. Let's rock and roll. Super easy. Like, I went from Tahquamenon Falls to Grand Marais. It's about 65 miles in 6 days. We can do this. And there's a town where I can get a cheeseburger, where I can get a beer, there's laundry facilities, like it's everything I need to get myself ready to go for the next 6 days. Super easy. I'm going to go from Tahquamenon, Grand Marais. I'm going to go Grand Marais to Munising. There's a Marquette. It was just all spaced out. Like somebody was planning it for me. It was nice and easy east of Marquette. So you had Grand Marais, Munising, and Marquette. In Grand Marais, I stopped at Woodland Park. If you're doing that section, it was a wonderful section from Tahquamenon to Grand Marais. Elevation was not difficult. Water was easy to find. Campsites were super easy to find. All dispersed camping for the most part. It was great. Woodland Park is really nice to camp at. They've got showers. They've got laundry. Grand Marais, there's restaurants. It was glorious. Munising, there are laundry facilities. There are motels. There are other campsites that you can get in there with showers. Wonderful. Marquette got a little trickier because Marquette's a little bit bigger. What I did is I stayed at Rippling River Campground when I hit Marquette. My goal was to do 6 days and then take a 7th day and let my body catch up. I just didn't do anything but laundry and murder cheeseburgers. Marquette got expensive. And what I was looking at in Marquette was motels in areas that my brother-in-law, who was from Marquette, was like, you don't want to stay there, bro. And so what I found was Rippling River had cabins and glamping tents. The cabins go like that. I got the glamping tent. I wound up happier with the glamping tent than I would have been with the cabins. The cabins were all on top of each other. The glamping tent was kind of off by itself, right on the river. Had electricity. It was wonderful. They had showers there. They had laundry facilities there. They had a little pizza bar place there. It was everything I needed to do a zero. It was wonderful. When I got west of Marquette, finding places to do a zero became difficult. The trail west of Marquette really doesn't cross any towns. And so when you're trying to get off trail to do your laundry, to get a resupply, you can't do that. Like you're just not rolling into the next town that the trail crosses. It doesn't. Now the trail did roll into Craig Lake, and because I did these sections with people, I was able to cheat some of those margins. And so when we rolled into Craig Lake, which is a really, really, really neat state campground, we got a yurt for a couple of days, and the yurt was phenomenal. My brother-in-law was with me on that section. We had his truck waiting for us. So we got there, went into Van Ripper, were able to do showers, do laundry, all that kind of nonsense, and then come back and spend a couple of days, couple nights at Craig Lake. Once I got beyond Craig Lake, there's just, the trail doesn't go through any towns. And trying to figure out how am I going to stop and get some kind of laundry done and get a reload became a lot trickier. And so what I wound up doing was I stopped at Mud Creek Road. The last couple of weeks that I was up there, my wife camped at the Porcupine Mountain State Park. You were at Union Bay? Yep. And so I roll into Mud Creek. My buddy who I did that section with had his truck parked there. We drove into Ontonagon, murdered a cheeseburger, did laundry, and then did a 0 day at Union Bay. And then my wife shuttled me and my next buddy who was doing the next section back to Mud Creek, and we walked to South Boundary. My wife came and picked me up at South Boundary, took me into Ontonagon, where I, again, found a cheeseburger, did unthinkable things to it, and did my laundry. And then she dropped me back off at South Boundary Road and met me at Presque Isle. And so I don't know how you would do this without trail angels or people to help you when you get west of Marquette. For me, it wasn't an issue because I did 7 sections. 2 of them were solo and 5 of them were with people. And so I was able to, the people who were meeting me up there, and it was different people on those 5 sections, were able to bring me reloads and help me get places. When it came to site selection, again, east of Marquette, there's all kinds of flat spaces close to water. And it was really easy to find sites. West of Marquette is a different thing. But one of the things I had to think about, am I going to do dispersed camping or not? So my first night, I'm walking through Tahquamenon Falls State Park. You can't camp anywhere. You've got to reserve a spot in Tahquamenon Falls. But once I got past Tahquamenon Falls, for the rest of that section, it's all dispersed camping. You can camp anywhere you want as long as it's logging land or public land. And that's where Onyx was helpful, because it helped me figure out, am I on logging land or private land? And they oftentimes look the same. The difference is somebody shows up with a shotgun at your tent when you're on their private land camping and you didn't realize it. You're like, really? That's a UP, bro. It's just how it works up there. And so I was just figuring out, am I doing dispersed or not? So Tahquamenon Falls, Pictured Rocks, the Porkies, I had to reserve sites in advance. Everything else was dispersed. All I did was make sure I'm on public land or logging land. And if I can find a flat spot where there's not too many trees, I can set up camp and we can rock and roll. It was a different kind of experience for me. Again, from Tahquamenon Falls all the way to Autrain Lake, which is just west of Munising, sites were super easy to find. I mean, this is in Tahquamenon. They had picnic tables and fire pits, for goodness sake, everything you could want. This is on the shores of Superior, a little bit west of Tahquamenon Falls. There's a flat spot. We liked it. There's water in the lake. Let's go. This is in Pictured Rocks. Anybody recognize this? Pictured Rocks junkies?
Looks like a group campsite.
It's cliffs, which is miserable. It's dry camping in there. At that time of year, they weren't bad at all. Yep, they weren't bad. When I got west to Autrain Lake, I would be like, okay, this is on the map. This is where I'm going to camp. There's water there. And I had a couple of times between Autrain Lake and Marquette where I'd get to where I thought I was going to camp, and there was water there, but there was not a flat spot without trees to put down your tent. It just didn't exist. And so then you get out your map and you look for the next spot you think you're going to camp, and you start walking to it, or I'm a 3-liter, 3 liters what I need to dry camp for night. I know if I walk into camp with 3 liters of water, that'll give me everything I need to do my business and walk out of camp with 1 liter in my pack. So either I'm going to walk to the next water source and hope there's a flat spot there, or I'm going to pile 3 or 4 liters of water in my pack and I'm going to walk until I find the next flat spot, and then I'm going to stop in camp. But I don't want to do that because I like to get to camp, set everything up, get in the water, get cleaned up, and then sit down, and then I'm nice and clean when I'm getting into my quilt at night. So I loathe the dry camping thing, but sometimes I couldn't avoid it. West of Marquette. This is primo camping west of Marquette. What you are looking at is the crossroads of 2 abandoned logging roads. We walked an extra 4 miles to find that flat spot. We carried a bunch of water. When we got there, we found the antenna to somebody's off-road vehicle that had been left back there, and we used that as a weed whip to knock down the weeds enough to set up our tents. And that's ideal camping west of Marquette. This is at the Silver Creek Basin. We got there, I thought, oh yeah, we're going to camp at Silver Creek. There was no way we were camping at Silver Creek. We got about 50 yards off of the trail, just into the brush, wandering around the basin before we found 2 spots flat enough to put up 2 tents. I'd never done anything like that in my life. It was really cool. It was actually very freeing. All of a sudden I was like, hey, there are things I can do that I never even thought of trying to do. And it was another 3 miles before we got to another flat spot. And what I wound up doing, as the further west we got from Marquette, every time I walked by a spot that I could camp, I would stop and mark it on the Far Out app. So the next time I find myself doing some of these sections, I actually know where there's spots that I can camp. This is how you get desperate west of Marquette. So we walked through the McCormick Wilderness. If you're not familiar with the McCormick Wilderness, it's part of the North Country Trail west of Marquette, and it is unblazed. The entire North Country Trail will have a picture of these goofy blue blazes. You just follow the next blue blaze, and it's really well marked. The McCormick Wilderness, I don't know why they won't let anybody blaze it, but you can't blaze it. And so you're doing your best to follow the trail. The gentleman on the right is my brother-in-law, Jeremy. He went to Northern. His degree is in some outdoor thing. And he, what's that? Sounds good. He spent all kinds of time in the McCormick Wilderness as a student and then as a grad student teaching folks. It was like Gandalf in the Mines of Moria. I just got behind Jeremy and he never stopped. We got about 2/3 of the way through the McCormick Wilderness. It started raining. The brush started crowding. And so by the time we got out of the McCormick, we were just completely soaked. Water, I would step and I could watch the water come out of my trail runners. You know, we got out and Onyx said there were 2 campsites there. Onyx is a dirty liar. There was nowhere to camp. We walked a mile up trail looking for a place to camp, nowhere to camp. Walked a mile back down, nowhere to camp. We were so desperate. Yes, those are our tents that we set up in a parking lot that night. We used this little kiosk as someplace dry to put our gear, take off our clothes, get something dry on to protect us from the rain until we get the tarp set up. And we slept in the parking lot because that was the best thing we could find that night to camp. And we kept going west. It was another 3 miles, before we hit a flat spot. It was just a trickier animal. Now, there were some amazing spots to camp. We'll look at some video of this later. This is overlooking the Victoria Basin. We got up there. You're about 1,800 feet up above the Victoria Dam and the basin. It was stunningly pretty. The trail, again, you got these little blue blazes. And even when the brush was up to my sternum and there was no trail, all I did was look for that next blue mark. And the trail associations really did a good job of having those up there. All right, reloads. I just figured out, what do I need for a week? I'd put it together and I'd put it in a box. And there were things like my food, things like my hygiene, the gas, the next thing off, to keep the bugs at bay. And I had 7 boxes, and I went up there with the first box. And then my buddy who was meeting me for week 2 had week 2's and week 3's box in his car. And so I got done with week 1. Steve met me. I got week 2 out of his car. That's what I took with me on week 2. At the end of week 2, week 3's box is in his car. I pulled that out, throw it in my pack, and away I went. And because I had people with me, I just got those to the right people, and they would meet me up there. Before I knew if that was going to work or not, what I did was, in Grand Marais and in Munising and in Marquette, all the places that I was going to stay at, I communicated with the people there, and they were like, oh yeah, you can mail your box to us and we'll have it waiting for you. Once I got west of Rippling River, there was no place to stay. And what I started doing was I was emailing the North Country Trail Associations or reaching out to them on Facebook and just going, hey, I'm going to be in this area at this time. Is there anybody who I could mail my box to your home and you'd be willing to bring it to me on trail? And people were going to do that. And so I could have done it that way. I don't know how it would have gotten laundry done. I don't know if I could have paid them to maybe drive me into town or whatever, but I could have gotten reloads that way. But I just kind of put it out there to all my friends. Anybody want to come? And again, I was out there for 7 weeks, 6.5, but we'll call it 7. And 5 of those, somebody was with me, always different. And 2 of them were solo. And so I didn't have to do that. All right, one more switch here. How amazing is this guy? Why I hike.
Why do we have to do a switch?
I put it in 3 separate PowerPoint programs instead of 1, and I didn't realize I was going to make this fine man's life tortured by doing so. There you go. All right. So why do I keep doing this kind of nonsense? There are a number of reasons. The people. I got to spend time, the gentleman and the bald guy. That's my best friend, Brett. Brett's wife passed away about 4 years ago. He has a daughter who's off the rails and another daughter who is Down syndrome. Brett's life is really hard. I got to spend a week on trail with Brett. He got a break from all of that, and I got to be with my best friend for a week. It was awesome. Steve is in the bottom left corner. Steve's a guy that I go to church with. He's one of the best people you will ever meet. Just to get to spend a week with Steve was amazing. My brother-in-law and nephew are in this upper right-hand corner. Jeremy and Arn are just they're great to be with. And Jeremy knows the UP so stinking well, saved my biscuits a couple of times. Michael is a friend from church. He's kind of in the middle of there. And then Jensen, who, I don't know, kind of looks like Samwise Gamgee with that getup he has there. Just the time I spent with people was just precious. The relationships that I had, that I got to pour into more, the memories that I got to make with those folks, the laughter, the camaraderie. I just really enjoy people on trail. The 2 weeks that I did solo, I really liked that too. And so it was a really nice mix. But if I'm going to pick one or the other, I'm going to have people with me. And I'm a bit of an introvert. But the people with me on trail was just, it's part of what makes hiking something I love to do. The views were just stupid. And I'll just roll some of them by you. This is Parcel Lake. It's a little bit north of Tahquamenon Falls. It's the first place we camped when we got out at Tahquamenon Falls, and it's just dispersed camping there. We went to bed that night. I didn't get a sunrise or a sunset until we hit Pictured Rocks because of the Canadian wildfires. And so that's the sun trying to poke through for a sunset, but it's all smoked out. But we got into bed that night, and we got sandhills going off and then coming across the lake and going off. It was just stunningly pretty. Woo! What happened there? Let's try that one. What's going on there, Jeff? I don't know either. All right. This is Pictured Rocks. If you've never been to Pictured Rocks, it's super accessible. The trail is super easy to hike. The views are ridiculous. And it's not expensive. You can do Pictured Rocks really cheap. The sunsets on Superior were great. This is Craig Lake coming out on a foggy morning. The waterfalls, when you got west of Marquette, the waterfalls were insane. You had Canyon Falls, you had Sturgeon Falls, you had Kundakun Falls, you had Bond Falls. I mean, just one after another after another. They were gorgeous. This is Canyon Falls. It doesn't capture it. And there's dispersed camping, like 100 yards away from this waterfall. This is Bob Lake. There are sections where there's just nowhere to camp for about 12 miles. And so what we had to do was come off the North Country Trail, walk a mile into Bob Lake and camp there for the night. It was $20. It was worth every penny. The place was gorgeous. And outside of the camp host, there was one other person who was there. You basically had the place all to yourself. This is Kundakun Falls. It's about a 20-foot drop from the top to the bottom there. The river's really shallow. So that night I walked through the river and I took my shower. That was the only shower I had on trail. You could get behind the falls. And so I got behind the falls. I stepped into the falls, got all wet, got all sudsed up, stepped back into the falls, got rinsed off. It was amazing. This is up on top looking over the Victoria Basin there. This is a section called the Trap Hills. So from Mud Creek to South Boundary Road is the Trap Hills. I nearly killed poor Jensen. Pictured Rocks, 44 miles, elevation gained and lost. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of about 2,500 feet. The Trap Hills was 55 miles. We did it in 6. I did it in 5. We were initially planning on 6. Elevation gained and lost was 8,000 feet. It was a ton of climbing, but you would climb up and then you would go back down again. And you climb up and you go back down again. It was brutal. The North Country Trail doesn't believe in switchbacks. But when you were up top, you got views like this. And they were just ridiculous. Absolutely stunning. You could just see forever. And when you were up there, you had 5 bars. I mean, you could just, like, when you're down in there, you couldn't call anybody to save your life. When you were up top, you were above everything. You could make cell phone calls and get people off trail whose feet blew up on them or whatever else. Just the views were amazing. The wildlife over the course of the trail, I like seeing the wildlife. I have people tell me I'm out of my mind that I want to see, you know, cougars and bears and moose and whatnot. I like it. Let's see if we can make this work here. All right. This is just outside of Marquette. We're walking along, and there are the otters. And they're just swimming along, and they were as interested in us as we were in them. You don't get that kind of stuff if you're not in the backcountry typically. What do we got here? This is at Bob Lake. The beavers in that section were forever flooding the trail out, and so you're trying to get around all their little dams and whatnot. But this little guy was there, and he was content to just stuff food in his face while we took video. And I didn't mind the dams so much because he was really kind of cute. He's a neat little guy. We're walking along, my buddy and I. We hear something rip through the brush, and then you hear something clawing up the tree, and it was a couple of black bears. I wanted so bad to see a bear, and we got to see one. It was really stinking cool. Funny thing was, we're just walking and talking. If it had just sat there in the brush, we'd have walked by and never even known it was there. I don't know how many bears I walked by over the course of the thing, but we saw those too. And then I hike for the experiences. There are things you get to do on trail that you don't get to do if you're not in the backcountry. So this particular day, we hiked 12 miles. The spot we thought we were going to camp and get water, there was nowhere to camp. We packed 4 liters each because we were a little paranoid, climbed up. I was confident that at the lookout, we were able to get someplace to camp. And this is what the front porch looked like that night. It was not a bad view. That's the Victoria Dam down there. We're up about 1,800 feet above that. And then you've got the basin there. And we just made a campfire up there that night. It was stunningly pretty. You're not getting that unless you're in the backcountry. This thing, almost to South Boundary Road, and I get to this little guy, and I thought, bump it. Took off my backpack, and I climbed up to the top of this little baby. What you could see when you were up there was absolutely amazing. You can see you're well above the tree line. The wind is whipping through this little tower that's up there. But it was stunningly pretty. And again, just as far as you can see, you just got wilderness. There's just nothing out there. And for me, that's just food for my soul. It's just beautiful. I like it. Pictured Rocks. Anybody familiar with Chapel Beach at Pictured Rocks? All right. If you climb up there, you can do this. And there's usually a line up there. Again, you got to be in the backcountry to do that. You're not seeing that on the little boat. Well, you might see, but we've seen people when we're jumping off of there. But if you want to do that, you've got to be in the backcountry. There's just certain things. If you want to do these things, you got to be in the backcountry. And then hiking, I found there were a couple of things that really struck me when I was on trail. One of them was just simplicity and challenge and the association that has with appreciation. We tend to be pretty comfortable. And if you have any kind of affluence, you can kind of buy your way out of a lot of discomfort. And I found when I was on trail for 6.5 weeks, I didn't have that option. And it was good for me. There were things that I appreciated. Like, I remember sitting down on the shores of Superior. We had just done an inland section. It was hot that day. And we came around the curve. We sat down. The wind is coming off of the lake. The temperature dropped about 10 degrees. And I have a packet of chicken that I've put Fritos and Cajun seasoning and 3 mayos into. And it was the best meal I had ever had in my life. You get off trail for about 4 weeks, and it's not the best meal you've ever had in your life. We have so much. We work so hard to keep ourselves so comfortable. It keeps us from appreciating things that we would otherwise appreciate that are much simpler, that if we weren't so stinking comfortable, we would appreciate, but we're so stinking comfortable, we miss out on some of that. The other thing that I noticed when I was on trail is I could have everything going right for a day, and then one thing go wrong, and throw, just lose sight. I've been blessed with the opportunity to be off work for 8 weeks. I am with my best friend on the trail. We just had the sandhills going off that night, and it rained last night. The brush is a little bit wet. Now my feet are wet, and everything is ruined. I thought, this is stupid. Like, to let one thing throw everything else off makes no kind of sense. And so I remember catching that early on and going, I want to focus on the things that are positive going on around me, rather than letting this one thing ruin all these positive things. And then about 4 weeks in, I thought, what if I could do that in reverse? What if I could, in the midst of a day where like half a dozen things are going wrong, what if I could find the one thing that's really going well and let that overwhelm the negative the way that the one negative thing overwhelms the positive? I'm still working on that. I'm still not good at it, but as I was out there packing, it's something that struck me. So that's kind of nonsense that I brought with me to share tonight. I've been going for about an hour, which I think is the goal here.
We're good for about 5 more minutes.
All right. I'm happy to field any questions. All my nonsense is up here. You're welcome to come up here, touch it, look at it. Just, I don't remember which commandment it is, thou shalt not steal. Just leave it on the table.
So if you can just repeat the questions that are asked, that way it'll be
Yep.
picked up by
On the live stream? Yep. All right. Any questions?
How was navigating the McCormick Wilderness?
So,
How was the
the navigating of the McCormick Wilderness? Again, it's not blazed. There's trail. You can see the trail. Sometimes it's really clear, and sometimes it's not. I think my brother-in-law was with me, and he spent tons of times in the McCormick, and so he ran point, and literally, every now and then he'd pause and then just go again. I think if I had been by myself, I'd have been okay. I think it would have taken me longer, and I think I'd have been in my phone using that navigation more, but it was doable. But because I had the cheat of Jeremy. So, yes, ma'am.
Your mileage that you said per day, was that a tracking app or was that MCT miles? Specifically, like you said, if you walk a mile here, 20 in the camp, a mile back.
Yeah.
Was that part of your?
How did the whole mileage work on the NCT? So I was basing the mileage off of what Far Out said was, the mileage from this point to that point. I think it was accurate. One of my friends who came with me calls me a liar and says, no, Far Out doesn't give you credit for as many miles as his Apple Watch gave him. I don't know, whatever. But if I went up a trail and came down a trail, it would let me know, you've gone here, you've gone there. Or a nice thing about the Far Out app, I could be right here. I could push on my app, hey, here's this water source that we're heading to. And it would tell me, here's where you're at. And based on the NCT, it's X amount of miles to that water source. Or it's X amount of miles to this campsite that you've loaded into the app when you're at home. It was super helpful and did a nice job of helping me keep track of the miles. So does that answer your question?
So it was actual miles.
Actual miles, yes. Yep. Yes, ma'am.
What was the name of that inflator thing that you had?
It's called a,
What was the name?
thank you. What was the name of the thing that I used to inflate my sleeping pad? It's called a Pad Pal, P-A-D-P-A-L. You might be able to get it Garage Grown Gear. It's oftentimes sold out. There's a very similar inflating device that oftentimes isn't sold out. I can't remember the name of it, but you look up, inflators for your sleeping pad, and they'll give you a whole bunch. They're super light and they're super expensive. So it's about $50 for one of those, but it doesn't weigh a doggone thing. I'm carrying a battery or a phone anyway, and it just made my life so much easier when I got done with the day.
Where do you want to hike next?
So in May,
Where?
doggone it, thank you. May, where am I hiking next? In May, we do an annual trip, my wife and I. We usually try and sucker people into it. We'll go to the Porcupine Mountains in May. And we do that because in addition to tenting in the Porcupine Mountains, they have backcountry cabins. And so you go mid-May, it still gets pretty stinking cold at night in the Porkies in mid-May, but every one of the backcountry cabins has tables, bunks, and a wood stove. And so it's kind of the way that we trick people into backpacking, because you're only kind of half doing it, and you get them to fall in love with the trail and whatnot, and then you graduate them to sleeping on the ground. So that's planned for May. In last week of August, first week in September, I'm going to do St. Ignace up to Tahquamenon on the North Country Trail. And then I'm going to do, again, I'm already there. I was like, I want to do 2 weeks. I'm already there. I'll do Tahquamenon over to Grand Marais again. So that's the big hike that's planned for this fall. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
And did you have to recharge? Did you have a solar?
No, so did I, oh, thank you. So how did I recharge all my electronics? It was easy to do in Grand Marais and Munising and Marquette because there's plugs. And so I just brought a little charger that I plug in and a couple of cords, and I'd charge everything up and away we would go. When I got west of Marquette, now it became difficult. So in my reload box that I was going to have at Craig Lake, we had a yurt at Craig Lake, but there's nowhere to plug in there. So I had a cheap 10,000 milliamp battery that was part of my reload box, and I recharged all my stuff off of that and then gave the battery to my nephew. When we were at Union Bay, the campsites there have hookups, and so I was able to recharge all my stuff that way.
We have time
So
for
you recharge once a week.
one more question.
Once a week. Yeah. And I found if I put my phone into airplane mode and I'm not playing solitaire on it, I was fine. I have a 6,000 milliamp battery. It's a night core, and I never drained it down completely. I was always fine.
One more?
How would you describe the trail from Tahquamenon Falls to Grand Marais?
Yeah. How would I describe the trail from Tahquamenon to Grand Marais? I really liked it. It was, the elevation wasn't bad. It was a lot of pine and kind of a soft dirt, sandy trail from Tahquamenon till you got to the lake. And then along the lake, there was a nasty area. There was a wildfire right up in that area a few years ago. And there was about a 5-6 mile stretch where you were walking through the charred remains of that wildfire. And so it was very exposed and a lot of sand right along the lakeshore there. But once you got through that, the stuff along the lakeshore was kind of just up into where the woods were. So it was shaded, but you could still see the lake. It was very enjoyable. And then the rest of those nights were all on Superior and dispersed camping. I really enjoyed it, which is why, this fall I was like, okay, I've never done St. Ignace up into Tahquamenon, so I'm kind of, connecting the dots here. And I was like, I'm up here. I want to do a second week, and I enjoyed that section so much. Even though I did it last year, I'm going to do it again this year.
How many days?
I'm going to do it a 65 miles, 6 days, and depending on how many days, 6 days, 65 miles. It all depends on how many you want to walk how many miles you want to walk a day. I'm okay with walking some more at this stage of the game. That may change as the years roll by.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And again, the nonsense is here. You can, come.